Everybody's talking to Paul. I hear every word they're saying on my laptop, on my phone. When life seems a constant battle, I tune into Earnest Prattle. It will brighten even your darkest day.
Hello, welcome to Earnest Prattle edition 19. And if I say so myself, today's show is a bit of a little cracker. But before we get to that, a little bit of housekeeping. If you'd be so kind, would you please subscribe, press the like button, maybe leave a comment or share. Any of those things, I'd be very much obliged. Now, on to today's vlog, and we've got a fantastic guest. He's a very colourful and positive individual who goes by the name of Colquhoun. Yes, named after my favourite foodstuff also, so it's a double bonus. He's a children's storyteller, author, and just all-round entertainer. Great bloke. So, without further ado, roll VT. So, hello, it's Colquhoun. Have I got that right?
You certainly have. That is absolutely gorgeous. You're probably the first person to have me on their interview channel program who has pronounced it correctly first time, without me even telling you. That's the more amazing thing.
I'll take a lot of plaudits for that. Thank you very much for saying. And what a fantastic name, by the way. I'd just like to start off, if that's all right, Chip, if I can call you Chip. My name's Paul, but you can call me Ernest, as per the old vlog. But can you just give me a little bit of background about yourself personally, please, if that's all right?
Oh, what, as in my height and weight, or...?
Not your height and weight, just you know, what did you do for a job previously? And I mean, I understand was you an author? I understand. Is it children's book author or?
I have written a few children's books, yes, but my first job, my first vocation, my first passion is storytelling. So if someone asks me what I do, who I am, I usually start by saying I'm a storyteller. That does sometimes include things like writing down books and sometimes even writing songs, but first and foremost what it's about for me is just sharing stories and ideally looking my listeners in the face and passing the story on that way, but you can actually reach a whole lot more people if you put it down in a book or do what you do and put it in a video. So I do a fair amount of that as well.
So initially, in relation to, you say you're an author, you're a storyteller. So how has the old COVID situation changed things for you in the way you've done things the last couple of years? Have you had to change things up a little bit and improvise? How have you gone about doing what you do, Chip?
Yeah, it's been very tricky, to be honest. Back 11, so a few years before we thought that this would ever happen, my little outfit, my storytelling outfit that I'd set up with a friend of mine, was asked to record some of the first ever online storytelling videos to camera. That had never been done on the internet before. I think they'd done it on TV a few times and on DVD. Okay. But this was the first time we had done it to camera, and they were really, really successful. They certainly helped us to take our storytelling all the way around the world. But the reason why they were successful was because they engaged children, and they engaged the schools who were using them as resources, and the schools then wanted to get us to go in person because they were developing a relationship with us through those videos. So when the pandemic came along, we thought we'd have a bit of a head start on most of the other companies out there, because we were experienced at this.
Yes.
But the moment the first lockdown happened, within days, you had some really big names like, well, the National Theatre was one, Eddie Redmayne was another, Dolly Parton was another, and they're all really, really fantastic at what they do: theatre, acting, singing, and of course, reading books is also something that they are pretty good at. But reading books is not the same as storytelling. And what we started to notice was that because they had the big Hollywood name, they were drawing all of our potential audience to them. We'd worked with schools, and schools were, really into us. They would spread the word of mouth for us, no problem. But now that there was a lockdown and all of the schools were having to do 3 different jobs at once, teaching the kids at home, teaching the key worker kids in school, and planning for an event that might eventually happen of all the kids coming back, we weren't able to talk with them anymore. They weren't looking at any outside providers for help. So what should have actually been an opportunity for us to keep going with our business and going really strong ended up getting buried because there were so many brands out there that started doing what we were doing, not as well, because they weren't doing proper storytelling. They were just labeling it as that, and everyone was being attracted to them. The great thing that happened during the pandemic was something called the World Storytelling Cafe. This was a hotel in Marrakesh that had wanted to revive the storytelling traditions of Morocco. And because the pandemic kind of coincided with that, they ended up putting it all online. And so they had loads of storytellers, myself included, some of the people I've worked with, and many, many more from around the world, going online and telling stories to keep people's spirits up during the pandemic. And it was really, really great to be part of that.
I mean, it's such an important part of kids, development, and I think I love the fact you're telling stories, but it's obviously encouraging kids to read books, which is something I think has probably lacked in the last 10, 20 years. I can remember at school, I used to love reading books, as a matter of fact. My mother used to sit down and tell me stories. And it's one of the old Mr. Men stories, and is it the town with 4 corners and stuff like that. And I used to love being told stories, but that's what got me interested in reading books in the first place. Mm-hmm. And I think it's so important, especially for kids as young as, like you say, 4, target audience up to 11. It sparks the interest in wanting to pick a book up. So, in relation to that, I mean, where do you get your stories from, Chip? What's your sources, or how do you?
All over the world, all over the world. And the great thing about being a storyteller is that your inspiration is basically the world. There are storytellers all over, and it's a properly communicative tradition. That's what this is. It's both an art and a tradition. But when a storyteller shares a story, they're expecting you to tell it to somebody else. That's the whole point of storytelling. It's completely different from something like acting, where the performer has something of a copyright over their performance, or writing, of course, where there is intellectual property in the text. In storytelling, it's actually a tradition of sharing. You expect to tell a story and for it to be shared on. Now, there is a little proviso to that, which is if I tell you a story, I would want you to share it on, but in your words. I wouldn't want
Yeah.
you to copy my words exactly.
Absolutely.
And there's a couple of reasons for that. The first one is that, you know, I've, and probably the storytellers before me, have put a lot of thought into how we want to tell that story.
Yes.
But the other reason is because it's to enable you, it's to empower you. The whole point of storytelling is building this tradition and building the future of humanity, really, because it's all about taking the lessons of the past and letting the phoenix of the future fly. So yeah, that's why I got attracted to storytelling, really, is because it's about that. And I know that you've mentioned children already, and letting children discover the joy of stories certainly is a great way into the joy of reading. And there's been so much scientific research that has now proven how those who love stories and those who love to read are the children who are going to end up succeeding the most at school and in life.
I agree.
But I'd also want to make it, you know, really, really clear that storytelling is not children's entertaining. There have been so many times had rooms full of adults enraptured in a story, and rooms full of children and adults enraptured, but rooms full of adults over the age of 80 enraptured. It's a universal art form. It really is, because, well, the way I usually describe it to folks is, as a storyteller, you're less of an artist and more like the conductor of an orchestra.
Yeah.
So it's your job, really, to keep people on the same page as everyone else in the room. But the actual creative work is being done by you. It's being done by the folks who are listening, because you're the one who's creating the story in your head as the words flow through the air and reach your ears. And if I say, for example, well, I won't use a Mr. Man. I was going to use a Mr. Man, but of course the Mr. Man characters are very visually select, aren't they? Roger painted them as well as wrote them. But if I were to say Little Red Riding Hood, for example, you have Little Red Riding Hood in your head right now.
I do.
Probably very different to the Little Red Riding Hood I have in my head. And probably very different to every single other Little Red Riding Hood that is in the heads of all of the folks watching your channel right now.
I'll tell you what popped in mind. You said Little Red Riding Hood. Mr. Wolf popped in there for some strange reason.
That's very different.
Perhaps that's my dark side. I don't know. You know, perhaps I need to speak to somebody about that. But
yeah, your Little Red Riding Hood is the one who's already in the wolf's tummy, clearly.
But you talked about the interacting and the way you tell your stories and the way people are getting involved. I actually had the pleasure of that last Saturday.
You did?
With your, I think, was it your, it was like was it a Kickstarter session?
Yeah.
So you've got this fantastic project, and I'll be honest, I came across you by accident, Chip, via family members, because somewhere down the family tree we're potentially related. Because I think you're in...
only potentially? I thought it was actually somewhere.
Probably are actually related, Chip, yes. We're in the same category, which is the family tree with our cousin Sue. So she suggested I tune in on Saturday to the Kickstarter and have a listen. And I was a bit sceptical, thinking this is probably aimed at children. But for 2 hours on Saturday afternoon, I was actually pleasantly entertained. I thought this is... When I was actually interacting, getting involved... And by the end of it, I wanted to tell my own story version of your story, and I wanted to get involved myself. I wanted you to make a character out of my alter ego, who is Earnest Prattle. And I think that's a fantastic name for a character in a children's book.
Oh, absolutely.
So it
sounds to me like a fantastic character in a sort of... have you read a series of unfortunate events?
Yes, I've seen some of those, yes.
I can imagine Earnest Prattle being a character in that series.
Absolutely. But, I mean, I wanted to touch on that because obviously that was a Kickstarter. Can you tell me what project that's in relation to and how important it is?
Yeah, I can. But first, I'll just say, usually I absolutely would have gone with that. I absolutely would have made up a story about Ernest Prattle, and I'm really sorry I
Oh, I'd love
didn't.
to. I'd love
The
to.
only reason I didn't was because that particular party was to announce the launch of our book, and the illustrator for the book is Corky and
Oh, yeah, he's very talented.
he's amazing, and he was there painting some of the illustrations for the stories live,
Yes.
um, but he was doing it in the sweltering heat because he's in Greece at the moment, and I don't know. You may well have seen on the news that they've been having quite a lot of wildfires recently.
Right.
Um, so he was already under a lot.
Well, no one was looking hot.
Yeah, he was already under a lot of pressure during that party. I think the fact that he was able to do his amazing quick sketch,
Yeah.
even in that soaring heat and with all of the stress of the situation, I think was just even more testament to his ability. But I did think if I sort of spur a little bit of improvisation on him, it might be a little bit too much.
Yeah, obviously, yeah. And if there was smoke start coming in via the window,
Yes.
you might have had to fill in for a little while. Thankfully, it was safe enough. But yeah, is it the rolled off the tongue project?
Rolled off the tongue, yes, and that is Roald, which is the first name of Roald Dahl, who is sort
I
of.
see what you did there, Chip.
Yeah, you see what I did. Oh, good.
Yeah, I see what you did there. Brilliant. So tell us all about that project, please, if you don't mind, Chip.
I'd love to. So, Rolled Off the Tongue is a collection of the stories that inspired Roald Dahl to become the man that he became. Because, as we've already spoken about, stories are what inspire you to read, and reading is what helps you to just be able to discover more about the world. And even if you aren't able to read so well, just the love of stories builds up the curiosity and the confidence to go and explore. Roald Dahl is a fantastic example of that because he loves stories. He listened to the stories that his mum used to tell him. He listened to stories from his teacher, and he used to write them down in letters back to his mum. And what did he become? He became an African explorer, a fighter pilot, a spy, a medical inventor, a script writer, a theatre writer, a great parent. Oh, and I think he became a writer of a few children's books as well, somewhere down the line.
He had time, sounds of things.
He had an amazing life, and really, you can see how his love of stories was what sparked a lot of that, especially given that his family was an immigrant family, and very shortly after coming into the country, his mother was widowed, and she was having to raise these 3 children all by herself with dwindling funds. Yeah, he managed to take that very shaky start and build practically a children's empire with it. So I just thought, having already seen myself firsthand how stories can really light a spark in children's eyes, how would it be if they had easy access to exactly the same stories that inspired Roald Dahl?
Yes.
So I started writing them down. And due to various pressures of lockdown and pandemic recently, I wasn't able to continue. I've been having to try and pay the bills like a lot of people have. But I've been working on this for about 4 years already. So there's a sizable piece of material there. And I had a few fans who I thought, do you know what? If I'm going to go out, I might as well go out with a bang. I'm going to send this to them and say, thank you for being so supportive. I'm going to have to quit the storytelling and the writing now, but here is my unfinished work. I hope you enjoy. And the response I got back was amazing. It had me overwhelmingly humbled because, well, the first response I had was from a parent who had started reading this to her daughter, who she knew loved stories. And she had a 6-year-old son as well, who was the kind of kid who bounced off the walls, didn't really care about reading. He loved screens, or he loved flying about like a headless monkey. That's the sort of kid he was. He was 6. She was reading these stories to her 10-year-old daughter. He overheard. He started listening. He started interacting with the storytelling as well as his mum was reading the book. And within 2 weeks, her son's head teacher was coming to her and saying, "What's happened to your son? His literacy has shot up. He started writing more. He started reading more. He started reading out loud more. He's actually written a 2-page story, which is pretty amazing for any 6-year-old. But for this particular 6-year-old, it had just blown their minds." And so this mother was getting in touch with me excitedly and saying, "Look what your book has done." And, you know, I read that message and I thought, I really have to finish this book now. And I wanted to make sure it wasn't a fluke. So I sent it to a few teachers as well. And I had teachers coming back to me and saying, even the kids in their class who don't usually engage with the classroom stories, even they were taking part in the activity of listening to this book, and they were starting to ask more questions. They were wanting to hear more. So I thought, well, there's only one way this book is going to get finished, and that is if we have a Kickstarter, so that I can really focus my time and energy on getting this book written. And obviously a Kickstarter also means that people who invest in it get to have one of the first copies of the book when it comes out. But I didn't want it to be just that. I wanted anybody who invests in the Kickstarter to actually have a role in the development. I mean, this is storytelling. And the great thing about storytelling is that you bounce off your audience. So I wanted there to be an opportunity for that as well. I wanted those who those who read the book to be able to send in what they think about it and just let me know, so that I can figure out what's working, what's not working. And I thought this could be a fantastic opportunity to get this book written and maybe inspire hundreds, if not thousands, of more children with exactly the same stories that made Roald Dahl the man he is.
So in layman's terms, how does the general public get involved with this project?
They follow a link, which hopefully is going to be in your description.
It will be in the description, yeah.
And when they get there, they'll be able to find out more information about it if they like, but they can make a pledge. And the way Kickstarter works is you say how much you are interested in giving to this product or this project, and if we hit our target, then Kickstarter will take that money from you and you will get your reward. Now, your reward in this case is going to be your name in the book, certainly, if that's what you want. If you pledge £10 or more, then you are definitely going to get a signed copy of the book, and it will be signed by Corky and me to say thank you. Everybody who pledges, even if you only pledge as little as £1, you will be involved in the development process. So you
Earnest Prattle's got to get in there somewhere. Absolutely.
Absolutely. That would be a great way of getting your name in the book, wouldn't it?
Absolutely, I do.
And we'll also have rewards on there, so that if you want to have a storytelling party to celebrate, like a little book launch party in your own online space, we'll do that for you. Both Corky and me will do that. Or you can even have us come to your garden, and we'll tell stories in your garden, obviously COVID allowing.
Right.
So
I'll have to get the old cleaning hose out and give it a bit of a blasting then, because I've not done it for a while. Give me plenty of notice, won't you, Chip?
Ernest, if you donate enough, I will come and I will clean your garden first.
Well, that's very kind of you. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. But doesn't it also tie into a couple of charities, which are very important charities for children?
Absolutely, yeah. We wanted to give people the opportunity, if you really love the idea of the book and you love the idea of supporting children in this way, but maybe you don't have children of your own, or you want to give a little bit more to the community, there are some charities out there who do amazing work with children. There's a charity called Assisted Reading for Children, which is just taking the whole concept of our book and making it even more real. This
Yeah.
is helping the most deserving, underprivileged of children, and helping them to develop this love and develop this skill. So you can, if you want, send a copy of our book to them so that they can use this tried and tested tool for encouraging the love of stories with the children that they work with.
And I'll also include links to those charities in the description too, if I can, if
Thank
that's
you.
okay.
Yeah, absolutely. The
Well,
other one, the one
thing.
that we definitely want to give a mention to is Honeypot, the Honeypot charity, because they support young carers in the country. I think the BBC have estimated that there are something like 700,000 children. That's children between the ages of 5 and 16 who are actually caring for the grown-ups in their house, maybe because those grown-ups are elderly or
Absolutely.
so they're the ones doing the cooking, they're the ones doing the cleaning, sometimes they're even the ones
You
cleaning
start me crying, Chip, and I'll tell you why. Because over the last 2 years, I've had a lot of problems with my health, and I was when we first went into lockdown, I was in the vulnerable group, and I was literally housebound for 9 months. I was quite poorly, and I had to rely on people for most things, to be fair. And my son, Paul Jr., who was only 15 at the time, stood up to the plate and was basically my hero, really, which it ties into what you're saying. He was partly my carer at the time. So that's why it resonated, and I actually got a tear to the eye when I read about the cause, because, I needed that type of support myself in the last 2 years. I mean, I'm in a better place now, and I'm improving all the time, basically. But I can relate to what you're talking about. Basically, it's a lot of children. If it wasn't for them, then their parents wouldn't get any care, basically.
Exactly, and some of those 700,000 will have been the totally unsung heroes of the pandemic.
Absolutely.
We were talking all the way through the pandemic, weren't we, about the unsung heroes, like those who work in the supermarkets and those who work on the farms, those who work in, obviously, the hospitals and the NHS, and they are all absolutely important. But the ones who didn't get a single mention were those kids who were now, like your son, having to look after the grown-ups who, for whatever reason, weren't able to or were put into that vulnerable group. So I'm very passionate about supporting Honeypot.
So we'll have to slip in Paul Jr. in the book somewhere as well, I think. I think we own that one.
I think we certainly do. In fact, I think he's going to get a copy dedicated to him, surely.
Well, that'd be fantastic. But I mean, can I say though, looking at you, I mean, I love your shirt. You look like a storyteller. I mean, when I first children's character, you reminded me. I know, don't take this the wrong way. You know what came to mind? Robbie Rotten off Lazy Town with the quiff. I don't know if you can remember that. It was the hairstyle, but you do. Your old persona. You look like a children's entertainer with your character, basically, and you're so enthusiastic. Actually, I
was going to say that the curly hair runs in the family, but obviously, if we're related, that's.
But
my mum was very curly haired. My dad was curly haired. So, according to one hairdresser, I am never going to go bald.
So, how did you get to work with Corky Paul, as we call him?
Well, Corky is most famous, I think, for his work on Winnie and Wilbur, the witch Winnie and a big black cat Wilbur.
That's right, Winnie the Witch.
Exactly. He has gone into schools quite a lot in his career to do artist and story sessions, but he's been spending more time traveling around the world recently, not just to Greece, but also to China. And the publisher were wanting to continue providing for the schools back here in the UK. So they asked us, because we'd done those videos for them back in 2011, they asked us if there was any way that we could take an experience to children in schools today that would still involve Corky in some way through digital videos, etc., but would have a lot of the storytelling element as well, so that it wouldn't infringe upon the art or the words of the existing Winnie books, because that would already be in the heads of the kids, wouldn't it? And us as the storytellers, like I said earlier, we'd be conducting those images. So that's basically how I ended up in Corky's studio, recording some videos with him, working on a little script and some interaction. We had a fantastic Wilbur puppet created to go into schools with us. I'd love to introduce you to him, but sadly, he's currently with his maker, getting a little bit of pizzazz. But yeah, Corky and I got chatting over lunch. He was interested about the work that I did, and so I told him a little bit, and I mentioned that I was working on this particular book, and he'd said, well, I'd love to illustrate something like that. So I then, at the time, I was developing the book with the Roald Dahl Story Company, the actual estate of Roald Dahl, and they had said, well, the illustrator you are going to have is Quentin Blake, because he illustrates all of the Roald Dahl stuff. So I was like, okay, well, I won't say that to Corky. But eventually the Roald Dahl Story Company said, we've got too much other stuff on at the moment. If you want to do something with this, by all means, go ahead and do it yourself.
Fantastic.
So at that point, I was like, Corky, if you're still interested, I would love for you to illustrate this, because actually he is more perfect, I think, for this particular book than Quentin necessarily would have been. Because yes, Quentin is the artist that you associate with Roald Dahl, but this is a collection of stories that go with the young Roald Dahl, you know, the Roald before he became famous. And so what Corky brings to it is a style of illustration that has that cartoony, quirky aspects that you get in a lot of children's books, but also has the real attention to detail and that awareness of nature that was actually there in the original stories that Roald was hearing from his mum and from his teachers. So it's like the perfect combination, really, because
you've got. Me, I think the illustrations are just as important as the story.
It has to be, really, because at the end of the day, when I'm writing, I have ideas in my head, and I'm sure the reader gets their own ideas in their head. So any illustrator has to allow a little bit of space for the reader to still put their own slant on it, especially in a storytelling book. And again, I think that's one of the things that Corky does really well, because his works are really, really detailed, but there's always movement in them. You know, you don't just have a picture of the character sat up against a wall. You know, it's the character running, or it's the character falling, or it's the character flying, or it's the character about to talk, or something like that. So the reader has to put that movement in and make it cinematic.
I was trying to think of an action pose then for the character Earnest Prattle, but I couldn't think of one, to be fair. I need Corky at some point to put that character on paper. I just think the name Earnest Prattle would be fantastic for a children's character. Uncle Earnest Prattle.
Those would be at a podium. I don't know if you ever saw any of those old pictures of Charles Dickens reading his works to live audiences.
Yeah, that type of thing.
To get portraits of him doing that. I can imagine that
that'd be absolutely perfect. I mean, to be fair, I actually came about the name due to my friend Alistair Morrison, who's a photographer, who was saying, you've got to pick a name for your vlog. And I thought, well, I can't use my name because that's a bit too boring, to be fair. So I came across Earnest Prattle. Is basically, Earnest means straight and from the heart, earnest speaking, because I'm an empath. And prattle means I talk a load of cobblers, basically. I prattle on. So I thought to myself, Earnest talking and Prattle. Oh, Earnest Prattle. What a fantastic name for a vlog. So that's my character. But I'd love to see it as an illustration. Obviously, I'd have to leave it to his imagination, but that would be wonderful. I'd love that at some point. So, anyway, I mean, we've probably got loads more to talk about it, so we'll have to do in the future maybe a part 2. I mean, when we get around to the book stage, perhaps we can do something to promote it a bit more for you.
That would be wonderful. But the Kickstarter stage is also kind of the book stage, because if you're supporting the Kickstarter, you are obviously getting a copy of the book eventually.
Have you got any more of those planned, by the way, Chip?
I beg your pardon?
Have you got any more of those video sessions planned? I thought it was fantastic.
We don't at the moment, but I am hoping we're going to have some more. I think we'll need to wait for the weather to cool down a little bit in Greece before we do, because it is very, very hot over there.
I'm nearly ready to wrap up, Chip. So, I mean, it's been absolutely fantastic talking to you. But what I want to do to wrap up the old vlogs is I get the people I'm speaking to say hello to my mother, whose name is Anne. So would you be kind enough to just leave a little message from her mother there, please, Chip, if that's all right? In fact, you're related, so it's kind of your Auntie Anne at the same time, Chip, isn't it, really?
My auntie, is she going to be my Auntie Anne?
She could be your Auntie Anne, yeah.
She could be.
Yeah, absolutely. So have you got a message for Auntie Anne?
I will say, hello, Auntie Anne. How did you manage to create such a wonderful human being in Earnest Prattle? You've done an amazing job. You must have been a great storyteller yourself. So from one storyteller to another, thank you ever so much. And I hope to see you soon.
Thank you very much. That was absolutely fantastic. So I'll wrap up on that. Thank you for your time, Chip. And we'll catch up soon. Thank you.
Ciao.